We are happy to announce that this episode of the SW Show is partially brought to you by Humble Bundle. Well, not really. We are part of the Humble Bundle referral program, and we just wanted to say that if you like really cheap games and maybe helping charity pending the Humble thing going on, all you have to do is go to humblebundle.com/partner equals SWW. That's right, humblebundle.com/partner equals SWW. And you just do your normal stuff, and it just kind of helps us get a couple bucks here and there. Maybe it helps AJ get his lights, maybe it's Mike camera, maybe we actually pay Corey for helping us out. But again, if you're going to go buy games anyway, it might be worth checking out.
Let me know when we're good. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of Season 3 of Formula S. The first time we got to see the new cars in racing action. We talked kind of last episode about more of the kind of preseason testing, but you don't really get a good idea of what these cars can do. So we finally got that chance. And we've got Bahrain, Jeddah, and a little preview for Australia. So, yeah, as we record this, we're like 4 or 5 hours post qualifying. So, yeah, we forgot to record an episode last week. Anyway, something that I had, speaking of things that we've forgotten, I forgot how good the red one looks. You know, because Verstappen brought back the tradition of the champion having number one. Because his comment was like, you know, I don't know if I'll ever get a chance to do this again, so I'm going to do it. Meanwhile, Hamilton never really did it. I think he did it when he was at McLaren, because that was back when they didn't have a choice. Because for those that don't know, so obviously drivers can choose their numbers now. But that's only been a thing since, I think it was 2010 or 2011. So before that, whatever your number was the previous year's standings for that car. So like, well, and you know, it's, I guess it's our Americanness, right? Like our only reference is like NASCAR, where you know, when you think of people like Jeff Gordon, you think of number 24, or you think of, you know, Dale Earnhardt Sr. being number 3. Like the numbers are the identity for a lot of these people, you know, for at least in the States. Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's the original English word. So yeah, I mean, it dates back to like the origins of F1, right? So it was mainly like, it's why we get a lot of the colors that we do. Like Germany's national color was silver, Italy's was red, Britain's was green. Um, the states, I believe, the current national color for the U.S. is blue with a white stripe. But so that's why like Mercedes is silver, Ferrari is red. Um, you know, that's why there's British racing green as a color. Um, you know, it dates back to that, and then you were known more. Like F1's always been kind of like a constructor sport. It's always been an engineering series. So it wasn't necessarily the driver that people cared about. And also, you have to remember, like, 50s and 60s, like drivers were dying left and right. So it was kind of hard to, yeah, it was kind of hard to tie a driver to a number because, at least for the first 30 years of the sport's history, also like drivers used to change a lot more than they do. So, the car has the number, the driver doesn't have the number. That being said, now that the driver has the number, that's why you see a lot of people using the number as their brand or whatever. So that's kind of, and that was pre Liberty taking over. So it's not something that F1 purists can point at and saying, "Oh, the Americans are ruining the sport." In reality, it was something that they always kind of wanted to do, and finally just did it. Speaking of which, I don't have it on the notes. They announced the third U.S. race in Vegas. I didn't. I just saw a lot of the Twitter and Instagram reaction. So. Well, wasn't that? I don't know if it was recorded on the first, but I think it went out on the first. Yeah. No, nope. It was very real. A much different track compared to when they were there last in the 80s. Because when they were in the 80s, they were literally in the Caesars Palace parking lot. Now, yeah, no, that was 83, I think, the last time they raced there was. Do you mean the 2 weeks? You do realize how much money this is going to bring to the city, right? Like, also, this is a joint venture between the county, F1, the FIA, and somebody else. So the organization that is basically hosting the race isn't paying a fee to because there's fees associated with hosting an F1 race. So you have to pay Formula One management. It depends. Uh, I've heard numbers ranging from 20 million up to 60 million just to host the race. Um, well, think about it. Okay, so if we take Montreal for example, because that's been around forever. Approximately 120,000 people go through their gate on race day. The average ticket is probably 300 Canadian. So you're looking at what, 30 million, 3 million just in, yeah, 30 million just in Sunday ticket sales. And then you add on top of that, um, people that buy for the whole weekend. Obviously, that number gets boosted when you look at people that buy like the high end, like the suite style seats that are in the thousands of dollars, and it gets pulled down a little bit. But like my ticket, which was I think the cheapest seat that they offered, was 146 Canadian just for Sunday. So it was about $100 US. So there's no cheap seat. There's general admission, but that was still like 60 or $70. So they can recoup the cost. Tracks like Silverstone and Spa have an issue with it because, like, first off, Spa's in the middle of goddamn nowhere. Um, and there's only it's like a 2-lane road that goes by the track, so traffic is just horrendous. And then Silverstone's in the middle of nowhere too, so there's no, like, they can get 180,000 people to go through the gate on Sunday, but that's about it. Because, like, there's nothing to do around the track. It's in the middle of fields basically. So, the tracks that are near cities like Montreal, or to a lesser extent, Austin, and then you go over and, like, it's one of the reasons why, like, the German Grand Prix doesn't happen anymore. They can't afford it. Like, the track organizers can't afford it. So, you know, if yeah, but they're rich because they don't spend their money. Like, they are, for lack of a better term, Jewish rich. They don't spend their money; they just save it all. They're not American rich, where you're rich because you're investing in. Yeah, yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's a yeah, like, European rich is generational rich. American rich, anybody can do it. So much like a Japanese or like a Singaporean uh, style of wealth. It comes fast and it goes even faster. Whereas European rich, it's like it's been there forever. So, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see. They're gonna do, it's like 1.2 or 1.3 miles down the strip, and somebody was saying 215 miles an hour down Las Vegas Boulevard, which is going to be insane. The the question that I have is, I mean, there's, those islands that separate the lanes, the directions. So are they just going to run down one direction basically? They're obviously not going to run the whole strip because, they have those dividers. It's not like Baku, which is 18 lanes in one direction. That'll be the interesting thing to see for sure. But speaking of interesting things to see, with the Bahrainian race, we saw, like I said, our first kind of real racing experience, and also our first chance to look at kind of who's going to do well for the next several years. Because so these engines are frozen effectively until 25. Yeah, so I mean, you're looking at, like, this is the engine performance for the next 3-4 years. So no engine development, no nothing. The only thing that they can do is basically fix something that, like, if it's a reliability issue. So the other thing that people are forgetting about is this is the first year that they are E10, so they have 10% ethanol. They had been using a synthetic fuel before, but this is the first time that they've had ethanol. And for those that don't know, ethanol burns a little colder, so it can kind of throw off your thermodynamics and thermal efficiency. But anyway, that means basically the development behind the ethanol. As a qualifying average, this is the engine provider's average, so from Bahrain. Ferrari was 7.3, Red Bull was 8, which, so they supply 4 teams. Renault was 9.5. Obviously, they just have their 2 cars. and Mercedes was 14.4. Like, you know, Mercedes is clearly lacking in something. Obviously, they supply both Aston and Williams, so their average is going to be dragged down. But Ferrari supplies Haas and Alfa Romeo, so their average should get dragged down. Red Bull supplies AlphaTauri, their average could, I wouldn't say get dragged down, but AlphaTauri's been punching above their weight class ever since they existed. So, like, that's one of those teams that, before AlphaTauri was Toro Rosso, like, you can't count them out. They're always one of those teams that's like, oh yeah, they're the Red Bull junior team, but then it's like, yeah, they're the Red Bull junior team. So, as for some interesting qualifying results, Kevin Magnussen is in his return to F1 qualifies the Haas 7th, ahead of George Russell in his Mercedes, who qualified 9th. So this is, I think it's his second best qualifying ever, Kevin, in the Haas. Because I think he got 6th in 2016 in Australia. Like, their first year at Haas was insane. So his return is obviously showing that the Haas they said going into testing was the most developed car because they gave up. um, they like gave up last year. They're like, okay, we're just switching to 22 development. So that was, I guess, a move from them, right? Like, to do that. And then Vettel tested positive for COVID, so he was out the first. Well, he ends up being out the first 2 races. So the Hulkster himself, Nico Hulkenberg, hopped in and goes 17th. He had I think they said it was 18 hours notice to get into this car. And obviously, with it being such a new car, it's kind of tough to expect anything out of him. Okay, just, yeah, you're learning everything in Q1 basically. Um, he ends up going 17th. So again, not quite sure. You see that result and you're like, okay, the car's slow. Is it just, he wasn't part of any of the tests for the new car? So is it just him kind of feeling out the car? One of those situations. But at the other end of the sheet, Charles Leclerc starts off the year right with pole from Verstappen and his teammate Carlos Sainz. And not much was happening during this getting to the race. Not much was happening, unless you were watching the battle between Leclerc and Verstappen, and they were just going back and forth, and it was awesome. It was so fun to see. And there were several laps where Verstappen was just seeing how deep he could go into turn 1. And a couple of times he kind of overcooked it, but it was just really fun to watch. And maybe this is a sign of things to come, but Pierre Gasly in the AlphaTauri has a complete power failure. And a lot of people thought it was a engine failure. But then if you go back and watch the onboard from his T-cam, you can see that his dash just goes black. It's not, so that's electrical. That's almost always something in the battery system failed. And it could be anything. It could be a loose wire. It could be a loose sensor. It could be the battery pack just failed. So it's not necessarily an engine issue. His engine did overheat because, when the car shuts down, the radiator stopped moving fluid, so it just overheated and caught fire. But um, it brought out the safety car, of course, because he was kind of on the back stretch there in Bahrain. So, excuse me, you need to get the car out somehow. You're not going to push it, so you got to put it on a flatbed. And so the way that his car died, there's a very good chance that the external neutral switch won't work. So if you'll see it on cars like on the F1 cars, there's like a red E on a white circle, and there's an N, and they're just on like the outside of the car. Those are buttons that they can push. So the E is for engine kill; they can kill the engine, and N is to put the gearbox into neutral. But if this was a electrical system failure, there's a chance that the pneumatics won't activate. So they ended up getting it out, and race gets going back. Max seems to have the same issue. It sounds like a battery pack failure, but it's an engine issue because they cut to the T cam and his dash is fine. It's not black. The power didn't cut out basically. Um, he had enough speed to get it back to the pit lane and get it in there, but had to retire. And then second to last lap, Perez has the same issue going into turn one, and the car spins out as a result. It's because sometimes what'll happen is like when the engine dies, it'll lock the differential in the gearbox because basically the clutches don't activate. And so what happened to Perez was engine dies, differential locks, and it just spins the car around because both wheels. So super simple definition of what a differential is. Basically, it means the wheels turn at different speeds. That's it. Um, and what happened to Perez was basically his differential turned into a locked differential, so both wheels spun at the same time. That's great if you're going down the straight because you want the same wheel speed. When you're making a turn, obviously there's different radius for each wheel, so you need to spin at different speeds. Suddenly, if they spin at the same speed, you go in loops. So that's what happened to him. Put Hamilton in the third. Leclerc ends up winning. Sainz second. Hamilton a very, very lucky third. I think if the Red Bulls didn't have their issues, you're probably looking at obviously no better than fifth, realistically, for the Mercedes. But with both Red Bulls having to pull out, moved them up into third. And Red Bull later on find out that it's actually a vacuum issue in their fuel delivery system. So basically, these, $1 million motors got vac locked. So what that means is there's air in the fuel line that creates a vacuum, and it'll shut down the whole motor because the motor pulls in air and it doesn't have any fuel and it can't burn. So it just seizes basically. Now that we know that, what did you think of that race? Did you watch the highlights? I think it was a really good showcase. That track is a really good showcase for these new cars, like how they can just kind of follow, closer to each other. That they can do a little more wheel to wheel stuff. Um, you know, like there were a bunch of times where between that Leclerc Verstappen battle where like whoever was behind going down the main straight, like they would pull alongside them thanks to DRS, and then it was wheel to wheel into turn one. You know, it would have been last year, right? It would have been more okay. following car gets a huge tow, and it's probably going to be in first going into turn one. Um, Now it's much more of a, okay, this is a driver, the driver situation. Um, and it seems like the Red Bull may be a little lower than the other cars because there were a lot of sparks coming off those cars. Yeah. Well, so for the Mercedes issues, they're saying it's at least an issue through till they get into the European leg. They are that confident that their problems are that big, pretty much, um, because they just can't figure out the power issue. Like, because it's really funny to think about because like from all reports, and none of these numbers are like definitive, right? Um, from all reports, the Mercedes motor without the hybrid was right around 1,000 horsepower. And then you tack on, I think it's like 250 horsepower with the electrical motors. So the thing that ground effect benefits from is a lot of power. So something happened where Mercedes screwed up some calculation. But the other calculation that was screwed up was when Liberty looked at their bank account and goes, "Oh, we need money," and didn't care who it was from. Money. Um, they didn't care who it was from. So let's put a race in Saudi Arabia because money. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of issues I have with this race, including I didn't put it in the notes. There was a missile strike like 5 miles from the track the day before the race. Um, this happened last year during the Formula E race as well. So as a result of this race, it was post race, so I didn't put it in the notes. The drivers basically went to. So the drivers have a union. It's the GDPA, it's the Grand Prix Drivers Association. They went to the FIA and said, "Look, we're not going to race in Saudi Arabia anymore unless you give us a vote or basically a say in where we go racing." Because, obviously the drivers' lives are at stake, right? Like for Formula One, it's just their bottom line. For drivers, it's their actual lives. So they now have a say in the negotiations for new races. Um, that being said, Saudi Arabia is a power track, fast as hell. It's a lot like Monaco, where mistakes are extremely costly, which we'll get to in a second. But Haas continues their great start to the season. Both cars get into Q2. So fast, very fast. You know who didn't get into Q2? Lewis Hamilton. First time since Brazil 2017 that Lewis Hamilton didn't make it into Q2, let alone Q3. He was knocked out by Lance Stroll, which I found hilarious. Like everybody's just ripping apart Stroll. Not a great driver, this or that. He out qualifies Lewis Hamilton. I find hilarious. But back to the Haas cars. Mick Schumacher hit the wall hard. If you didn't see the video of this, go look it up. He makes a minor mistake, catches the curb, and slams into the wall. Did a million plus in damages, basically rode off the car. And so I don't know if we've ever talked about this. The wheels on the F1 cars have tethers. I can't remember if we talked about it during when some of these crashes happen. So the tethers are designed to keep the wheel attached to the car. Mick had two of his wheels fly off his car. I believe those tethers are rated for like 60 G. So that's how hard those wheels were getting ripped off the car. The fact that it just basically took that 60 G tether and went, yeah, nah, son, I'm gonna go for a run. But yeah, Kevin Magnussen qualified 8th in Q2, so that takes him into Q3, where he qualifies 10th. Obviously, Mick didn't set a time in Q2 because his car was in about a million different pieces, along with $1 million+ price tag to fix it. But we did have another surprise. Finally, Sergio Perez, gets pole from the two Ferraris, Leclerc and Sainz. This is Sergio's first pole ever. Not first pole of the season, first pole ever. He started 215 races. This is his first race where he qualified on pole. This is his. Uh, I mean, for somebody that finally gets a pole, yes. There's definitely drivers out there that have more races that didn't. Actually, I don't know. I don't know if Ruben's record is up there. F1 most races before pole. So Weber had 131 races. Let's see. Races in started. Total poles. Most races without a pole position. Here we go. Grosjean never qualified pole, and he started 179 races. So that's the record right now is 179. Carlos Sainz Jr. is at 143 and counting. So in theory, he could do it. He could break that record. But yeah, I don't. That's got to be. I would say it's significantly past that record. So, and I guess the problem too is like a lot of these race number records are super inflated recently because like even if we go back to 1999, there were 17 races. So, and we're at 22 this year. So, you get an extra 4 or 5 races, and these numbers just skyrocket because, like, I think Grosjean's got 200 race starts. Like, he's got 189, but he's up there. Like there's going to be a bunch of drivers in the 300 race start category, which is always seen as this like Ironman milestone, but now it's 8 seasons, right? So if you start when you're 22, that's 30. So a lot of these Ironman records are going to be broken just because, yeah, just in much the same way that like if we look at the NFL, right, like a lot of the season records are going to start to break because now if they have 17 games in the season, there's more opportunities. So, um, speaking of having opportunities, this is just segue after segue. Yuki Tsunoda does not have an opportunity to start this race. His car has an engine issue during the formation lap, which is always hilarious to see. But yeah, um, tough luck for him. He's a fun one to watch. Fun character to watch off the track too. Uh, Latifi continues his tradition of crashing this weekend. Uh, Puts the car in the wall for a second time. The first time was during qualifying, and this one brings out the safety car because it was a shunt. Um, the other thing that was kind of the storyline in this race, other than how tight the track is, so like I said, mistakes are very costly, is it was abnormally warm. So we had what, 4 cars retired due to overheating issues. Um, so you had 6 retirements in this race. Obviously, Sonoda didn't even start. So it's kind of a DNS. It's a DNS for sure, but it's also a DNF. And then Latifi crashed. But then you had 4. You had Ricardo, Bottas, Alonso, and Albon all retire due to overheating issues. This is something we normally see in like July. Okay, yeah, we're in the Middle East. It's at night though. We don't normally see this many cars retire. This is what it was 20% of the field. There's 20 cars. So 20% of the field had heating issues. It's scary. And they were all different teams, right? So it was a McLaren, it was an Alfa, it was a Renault, and it was a Williams. So 2 Mercedes, a Renault, and a Ferrari motor. And then Sonoda's, Red Bull power was a different issue. It wasn't an overheating issue. But we have another Max Leclerc battle. I really hope these battles continue because these drivers are amazing. It was like 15 plus laps. It was insane. There's a clip, if you watch the race highlights, there's a clip where they're going into the final hairpin, both fully locked up, cars just sliding all over the place as they're trying to slow down. And it reminds me like watching highlights from the 90s, where like these cars that are out of control because back then they were tough to drive. Now they're driving them so hard. They're just like, oh shit, stomp on the brakes and hope that the car slows down situation. Yeah, I think this is going to be kind of hopefully, our fight this year between Max and Charles because they're both young, they're both hungry, and they're both amazing drivers. So Verstappen does get the better of Leclerc this time, getting the win. Carlos comes home third. Ocon and Norris have this great drag race out of the hairpin at the end of the race. And I think Ocon had a little PTSD because he got pipped at the line in basically the same situation last year. So he was like, I'm not losing to this guy. And ends up coming home fourth. So, yeah, that was. What did you think of Saudi Arabia? Because my impressions was, other than the Max Charles battle, it seemed very boring. Yeah, it's definitely the same issue. Like you said, WWE. Like you and I are, well, maybe not WWE fans. We enjoy watching wrestling, and the Saudi deal is such a just clear, just here's a check for everyone. They just don't care situation. And this feels very much the same way. The only difference being, like, drivers don't get paid just to show. I mean, they get paid to show up because they have contracts, but they're not getting cut a deal because they're racing in Saudi Arabia the same way that wrestlers that perform over there do. So, this is them saying, look, we don't want to be sent into these dangerous areas just for the parent company, basically. So, we do get to go on to, though, probably, I don't know, it's always my favorite track to watch, especially early on, um, because it's fast as hell and it's fun to watch. Australia, we get to go to the land of the Oz. This is the first race in Australia in over 1,000 days. I saw that stat and was amazed. Yeah, like when you think about it, you're like, okay, yeah, like Australia was the first race that they canceled, so like that makes sense. And then it was 2 years after that. Oh shit, yeah, I guess you start to add that up. It was basically a 3-year hiatus. Um, but in that time, the track has changed a little bit. They, I saw this comment and I just had to laugh. They eliminated the turn 910 chicane. Um, and my favorite comment that I saw about it was, okay, so they just turned the track into how everybody drives it in the F1 video games because the games are notorious for you can basically exploit how it views the car as being on track and stuff like that. So you can almost straight line that chicane. So they did it. They turned it into basically single turn instead of two, and it added a fourth DRS zone. So Formula One, their YouTube channel, likes to say that, oh, this is the fastest lap ever, or this is the lap record. I personally don't see it that way because it's a different layout. So it's still, to me, the record for the old layout is Schumacher's 2004 lap. So, which I believe it might be the only or one of the very few records that are still from that '04 season that the cars haven't been able to break. But obviously, this is a track that performance that we had seen. Ferrari should easily be able to at least get one car in the podium, if not both. Um, Red Bull are kind of in this, like, they have the immediate momentum, right? Like they just won Saudi Arabia. But it's like, okay, we need to figure out what's going on, right? Like, how do we take the fight to Ferrari? Because they're clearly the leader in the pack right now. And Mercedes is just standing there with the dick in their hands going, let's see what happens, right? Like, I hope we can get some points out of this. Haas loves this track. This is where they came out and stunned the world by finishing like 6th and 8th or something like that in their first race. They were obviously on track to finish 4th in 2018 before they had the notorious back-to-back pit stops where they had wheels that just didn't seat properly and they had to retire both cars, which kind of started the downfall of Haas. But hey, let's see what they can do. Vettel's car kind of died on him in one of the practice sessions, and no, it's never great. What is great though is watching him ride a scooter because he loves to ride motorcycles. So he takes the Marshall scooter, which the driver is supposed to ride bitch on those, and the Marshall's supposed to drive. Instead, Vettel's like, "Hey, I'm going to take the scooter," takes it out on track, and drives back into the pits. Meanwhile, waving to the fans and all that. he gets fined $5,000 for this because he technically broke a rule about being on track too early. This and that. It was less than 5 minutes after the session, and it's some bullshit. He gets fined $5,000. F1's social media probably made double that in the number of views that they got on the clips that they posted. Like, yeah, like, okay, he broke the rules, but also he gave you guys a legendary clip, and you're still gonna fine him. Which one? The who do you think you are? I am. Yeah, yeah, that's true. Or more of like the like deflate gate or something like that, where like obviously like there was potentially outcomes that changed due to deflate gate, but like Vettel did nothing wrong in the situation. So I understand the fine, right? Like he broke a rule, but maybe make the fine go towards like Boys and Girls Club in Melbourne or something like that, right? Like make it a charitable fine because then everybody comes out ahead, right? Like, okay, F1's already ahead due to the revenue gained from their social media stuff. Vettel's out $5,000, but that's nothing to him. But it's a charitable write-off, so he's happy, and F1 gets the good publicity for donating to charity. We get on to qualifying, and Latifi continues his streak of being a complete dumbass. He lets Stroll by. If you kind of want like a visual of this, go look up the qualifying highlights. Stroll's coming by, Latifi lets him through. Stroll then is going to let a car behind both of them through. Well, Latifi speeds up, and Stroll is moving over to let, I believe it was the Alpine, let him through. Latifi, speeding up as Stroll is coming over, runs into Stroll and crashes both cars out. And it's like, you dumbass. What do you think you were doing? This is like, okay, you let the guy through, keep him in front of you. Like you made that decision. You let Stroll through. He is now in front. This is like on the highway, right? Like you let the guy pass you and you make sure he stays in front of you unless you are clearly going to pass him. This was like, oh, I let him pass, but now I'm going to try to pass him. And just dumb, dumb move. An unfortunate move, not a dumb move, but a very unfortunate move. Bottas loses his streak. It was like 100 some odd races of making it into Q3. This streak started when he moved to Mercedes. So it was his entire duration at Mercedes plus the past two races. He made it into Q3 and finally got knocked out. And to catch us up to the present as we are recording this, Leclerc's on pole, Verstappen's starting second, Sainz is starting third. How do you think this is going to pan out? Do you think it's going to be another just Verstappen, Leclerc, just basically 12 round? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Leclerc's always been a good driver. Like it's just that Mercedes screwed the pooch on the motors and kind of their ground effect. But like Ferrari figured it out, Red Bull figured it out. I think this is a 12 round going to the judges. I think it's going to be another. This goes down to the last race or two between Leclerc and Verstappen. Oh, we definitely wish we had changed, but Also, what you have to remember is we're coming off of 6 years, I think it was, where the champion was decided before the last two races. Right. And then last year we get Verstappen, Hamilton going to the final race. Obviously, Michael Massey screwed the pooch in that situation, but it came down to the last race. And that just, everybody loves a championship battle that goes to the very end because that's fun. Like when Hamilton was winning the title in Texas, like he did a couple of years, that's not fun. Then he's got two or three races where he can just kind of like da 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 da, just drive around. But you know, especially with it being Leclerc and Verstappen, like these are the two. If there's going to be two characters that hold F1 up from a young gun point of view, it's these two guys. So having them have a season now where they can go toe to toe and keep it toe to toe so far is fun to see. Um, so yeah, we've got the race coming up in, as we're recording this, about 14, 15 hours. So as you hear it, probably less than that. Yeah, yeah, it's yeah, yeah. So going back to the Vegas race, everybody in Europe is complaining about, oh, this is going to be at 2 in the morning. Guess what? Every yeah, every American has had to deal with that. It's either a 6 in the morning start in Europe or it's 2 in the morning when they're in Japan or Australia. So yeah, it's luckily going to be a night race because otherwise it's going to be about 1,000 degrees. So yeah. So anyway, we will have another episode up hopefully in the not too distant future. We do have the paywall. That's just what that's just what we're going to call it from now on. The paywall. Oh yeah, we're going to have just the classic the sheet of the paywall. Yeah, it's just we're gonna have enough money so we can have a 10G stack of different currencies, and we're just gonna build a wall with everyone. Yeah, the tough one's gonna be when we have to get to like Zimbabwean dollars, and the 10G stack is gonna be not even one bill because they have $1 trillion bill, and so we're gonna be like, well, all right, here's a nickel. So yeah, we'll have another one up. We've got another break here after this race, so we will have a recap of Australia, and then we're into the swing of it. We've got Italy and then Miami. Going to Miami. We are not going to Miami because I look at the StubHub prices and they start at $600. Yeah, no, it's like yeah, no, but we have on the calendar potentially penciled in Vegas. So that is next November. Yeah. So yep. So yeah. And then we've got Mike's home race because they're going to be in Italy for the next race. So, yeah, our next episode will be a recap of Australia. We will see you guys then.
The SW Show and all of its affiliate podcasts are podcast by me, Mike Maroney, and AJ Losi, sometimes by contributors, including Corey King. You can follow the SWW Show on social media at the SWW Show, or sooner or later you go to patreon.com/SWW to help us out. Thank you, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day.